Dan Rubenstein, am I a little bit crazy, or was that the best modern week 0 we have seen in quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, there have been like 4 week zeros. So yes, of those 4, I don't know how many there have been.
Well, look, they've been doing it since 1983.
Okay.
Not
Just
as
random.
not as regularly as they have since 2016.
Yes.
But we've had these for a while. This isn't a new concept. We've just gotten a lot more of them in recent memory. And I was trying to think back. Obviously, we had the Georgia Tech upset, which was the notable storyline. We'll talk back through some of that here on this episode. But we also had the SMU game, which came down to the wire. We had Montana State, FCS, Montana State not covering the point spread, but winning over an FBS team. And then we had the Hawaii game. The Hawaii game, which was the late kickoff. The Hawaii game, which was not without its own drama building up to that game. Hawaii was like a 40-point favorite, something of that ilk. They didn't cover that point spread. We're not going to report a whole lot on that here. But 3 of the 4 games came down to the wire. And as week 0s go, that's a pretty good way to kick off the season, no?
Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below. Oh, it was a great way to kick off the season. I think Game Day had a wrestler as a guest picker, right?
Correct.
On the streets of Dublin. There was I saw some sort of allegation. I don't know if it's true or not, but here I am reporting on it. Pat McAfee puked during a broadcast on Friday afternoon in a pub in Ireland.
As one does.
There appeared to be some sort of storm over the Game Day set brewing that didn't ultimately cause any damage. And you had Joe Test talking about wind patterns, right? Because kicking was so important during the game. Where he was like, well, it's interesting enough when you look at the shape of the Aviva Stadium. Was that the name of it?
Aviva Stadium, yeah.
He was like, the wind sort of whips off from the northwest. And so that could be an advantage to the kickers. And I'm just like on my couch alone, nodding along like, that makes sense, Joe Test. Sure. And then, we had the great game, right? And we're going to have Florida State fans continue to freak out. We'll have Georgia Tech fans continue to be excited. We'll have people using that singular moment overseas in week 0 as some sort of referendum on an entire league and its future and potential lawsuits, which I think I personally encourage. I think that's great. So, yeah, it's all happening, Ty.
You got to use it if you got it. What was the comment that you mentioned to me about the new conference thing with Oregon? On Game Day, because I didn't watch all of Game Day.
I enjoyed also, it was like week 0, and it was like, all right, we got to spend some time getting our playoff picks in, which we did the same thing, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed, there was something, I think Desmond Howard picked Oregon to win win the national championship. Maybe somebody else picked Oregon to win the Big Ten, and it doesn't matter. You pick them, you don't pick them. I don't know. But there was skepticism from somebody that was like, I don't know if you can pick a school in its first year in their conference. Just come in and win. And they were like, they all agreed, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then they're like, on to the Big 12. We all have Utah, right? Like, it was just like, boom. It was great.
No transition needed, right? Just quick cuts and hope people forget.
Yeah, it was right before, it was right after. It was lovely. I never changed college football, and I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not above that.
No.
Right? I'm not above saying one thing and then going back on it 93 seconds later.
We've done it a multitude of times here. Welcome back in. I'm Ty. He is Dan. This is the Solid Verbal. If you are finding us, if you're new here, a lot of people are new here. It is the reason for the season. College football is back. Hit follow, hit subscribe. If you've already done that, please tell your friends so that we can continue growing the Verballerhood. We are off the charts right now on the Apple Podcast rankings because everybody is coming on back to college football and finding the show. So we're ever so grateful for that. And of course, if you are a long timer or if you just enjoy what you hear here, beyond telling your friends, if you can leave a star rating or a review, depends where you listen, all that stuff helps more people find the show. I did want to throw this in very quickly if I could, and we have much to get to, I promise, but we finally were able to tidy things up at the end of last week. Signups are now available for Run the Board.
Yeah,
so
baby.
Run the Board is our week-to-week and season-long pick'em game, right? You can play week-to-week, compete for fabulous prizes. You can play a season-long game against the entire Verballerhood, and you can win a seat on our board of trustees, which is, of course, a revered and hushed and respected position within the college football community. Week 1, you can compete for a $500 Visa gift card, which is 500. That is a lot of cash that you can use on the PlayStation or groceries or gas or whatever you're into.
Yes, he says. Continue.
Doesn't matter. $500 Visa gift card goes to the winner of our Week 1 Pick'em contest. If you are interested in joining up, you can go to verballers.com. You can go to playruntheboard.com. Both will give you insight into how you can play this game of ours. You have to sign up for a paid tier on our Patreon, a $5, $10, any paid tier gets you access into Run the Board. It will be 12 games, 12 things for Week 1 starting on Saturday. So you have up until Saturday to get in if you are ever so inclined.
Noon Eastern
time.
Yep.
We've got all the big games. We've got some player props this year, which I think will be a lot of fun. It's been fun. It's been a blast every time we've done this game now for the last couple of years. And each year we try to introduce a little bit of a new quirk to it. So playruntheboard.com, verballers.com, any paid tier will get you access. I just made the post this weekend for how you can sign up if you are interested in doing so. And of course, if you sign up, you get the other perks too, right? You get the ad-free episodes and the bonus stuff that we do on Thursdays.
Multitude, yeah.
You can vote in our Verballer Top 12 poll, which it was too early to do it this weekend. We'll start it up next weekend. And, of course, our Discord server, which went crazy, even though there were only a handful of games. Of course, the first one of the year is a pretty big upset. So,
yeah, of course.
Alas, verballers.com, playruntheboard.com. We'd love to have you as part of our big game. It's the biggest thing we do all season
Unless what, Ty?
Unless what?
Unless you're afraid to compete. Right?
Unless you're afraid to compete, right? No.
There's always a section of people out there. They're like, whoa. I don't have what it takes to compete. I don't have opinions about college football games. I don't think I know who's going to win. If that's you, if you are a scared person when it comes to competition, we urge you not to compete. Everyone else, throw your hat in.
I will say this though.
Yeah.
This is rich coming from you because there were multiple weeks last year that you skipped.
I took it easy on everybody. I was scared.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
I was scared to say oh my God, Dan, the host, is winning again. It's all rigged.
Okay.
I'm not scared to compete. I'll compete. I don't anywhere, anytime. I'm Pat Hill. I'm the Pat Hill of this show. You know that.
Shall we jump in?
Yes.
So look, you may recall that sound from a little movie, Wayne's World. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
We're calling this the Saturday Leftovers segment. Here is the way this is going to work from here on out through the season. We've got episodes that are going to drop late Saturday night / early Sunday morning. That will be the recap episodes. We do them live on YouTube, midnight Eastern. It'll hit your podcast feed early Sunday AM if you like to listen to the audio experience. We will do our Thursday previews. Those will drop to the feed early on Thursday morning. You can watch the episodes on Thursdays as well, noon Eastern on YouTube. And these episodes that we do on Tuesday, I think we have carved out for reflection, Dan.
Okay.
Reflection on the week that was. We will have some interviews. We're going to do a bunch of different things, but we did want to carve out enough time for ourselves to just react or share any reflections that we did not get a chance to discuss when we do the recap episodes. And I think you and I have a handful of them with respect to what we saw in week 0, because like I said at the very top, it wasn't just the Georgia Tech game. It was the SMU stuff where I have some SMU thoughts, Dan, because I was really high on the Mustangs going into the season. Yeah. So just a few things to get off my chest there. And of course, there were 2 other games as well. So why don't I start with you?
Okay.
Had like 48 hours now, whatever it's been, to think back to what we saw this weekend, notably with the Georgia Tech win. Is there anything that has been grinding your gears? Is there anything that's been stuck in your craw that you need to get off your chest?
Yeah, I mean, totally unfair that the national championship is going to be in Atlanta and Georgia Tech has a crazy home city advantage. Right? That's not okay.
If they make a bowl,
yeah,
I would still be in awe at this point. I looked at the schedule again. No, seriously. We went through and you mentioned it on the little recap that we did and dropped on Sunday.
Yeah.
And you said, well, the calculus has probably changed now that they beat Florida State. And in the moment, I was like, yeah, I think you're right about that. I think you have to be right about that.
Sure.
To an extent, you are right about that. But go back and look at the schedule again. Seriously, go back and look at that schedule again. They could start 4-0.
Yeah.
But after we get through September, I'm just like, I want to believe in this team. I want to believe what we saw is going to be a consistent thing throughout the course of the year.
Sure.
And for sure, they've looked better than they've been the last 3 years, right? That's undisputable at this point. But I don't know. I'm not ready to commit to that bit yet. because this is still a brutal schedule that they got to contend with.
Okay, so I'm scared of Fran Brown and Syracuse, obviously, but otherwise, does Notre Dame employ Tyler Santucci, a.k.a. the Tooch? They do not, right? Miami? No Tooch, right?
Tooch.
They're Tooch-free since 83. NC State, Georgia, nobody has the Tooch. Who has the Tooch?
Are you putting this all on the Tooch, Santucci?
All on the Tooch, Tyler Santucci. I think Georgia Tech is more dangerous. I don't know what that means for their final record. It is a brutal schedule, but I like the seasoning of Haynes King. I like that they had the wherewithal to say, like, well, we're rushing for 6 yards a carry. Why don't we just keep on doing that until Florida State figures out ways to jump in running lanes? I don't know. I'm still going to stick with my forever week 0 or week 1 theory of, like, it's never going to be as good as week 1. It's never going to be as bad as week 1. And you figure out what works and what doesn't, and you adjust along the way. And Georgia Tech knew that they had to get much better on defense. And whatever stock you put in week 0, it's a positive step forward. And so all that means is if their defense is more competitive, they potentially could win more 3-point games than losing 3-point games, because they could just, get a couple of second half stops where they didn't have that experience last year, year before, whatever. And I think it's good. On the Florida State side, they're going to get better. They are just going to get better, whether that's working in youth, whether that's getting healthier, whether that's figuring out what does and doesn't work for DJU in the pass game. We saw some quick throws that he probably should have let routes develop a little bit more and go through his progressions, really struggling downfield accuracy-wise and calling those plays. I don't know. I'm going to stick by it's a boring take. It's a boring thing that seasons are living, breathing things, and we should give Florida State an opportunity to at least look inward and figure out what works and doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, the line, the defensive line in particular is going to improve. I know I talked about it on the recap episode, but it is going to be one of the better defensive lines. They just got pushed around by Georgia Tech. I don't know if it was a scheme thing. I don't know if it was a preparedness thing. I don't know what it was, but Georgia Tech got the better of them. And I was thinking back to the preview that we did when we talked about Florida State. And I remember you specifically asking me what kind of team could give Florida State trouble. And I said it would not surprise me if Georgia Tech dumped them in week 1, because that's the style team that, at least earlier in the year, I was fearful of.
Yeah.
I was fearful because, like, the mobile quarterback, some of the questions they had on defense, not to say that they're riddled with questions, they aren't. It felt to me like that was a circumstance that could be ripe for an interesting game. I didn't expect an upset. I don't know how many people did, but for sure, that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on to see where they go. And one more point on the Tooch, Tyler Santucci. There's a bit of a track record there with him having time to prepare for a team and then essentially punching over at what anyone thought possible.
Yeah.
From the defensive side of the ball. And there are 2 other games here that are notable on this Georgia Tech schedule. There's a bye before they play Miami. There's also a bye before they play NC State. Both of those games are at home in the month of November. So I don't know if he can pull another rabbit out of the hat as they play against some teams that we also expect to be pretty good in the ACC, but there will be opportunity for that. I'm just really impressed by what they did on the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. I think Jesse Palmer called it out right away on the broadcast that already this pass rush looked better, and they were about 3 series into the game. I agree. The offensive line, the way it was able to kind of push Florida State around. Whatever you think of Florida State's defensive line and how good it isn't, like, for them to go out there and look as dominant as they did, I think is really telling. They were pumped up for that game, and they have been pumped up for these games, these bigger games that they've played under Brent Key. So I don't know. I've been really impressed over the last 48 hours thinking through Georgia Tech and what it means for them and what it could mean for their bowl possibilities this season. I still think it's going to be an uphill climb, but we definitely have to take another look at it for sure, even if I don't fully buy in at this point. The other thing that I wanted to call out,
please,
SMU Mustangs. How much of that game did you watch?
I didn't watch any in the moment. I watched it after the fact.
Man, Nevada gave that game away. They gave that game away. They had SMU dead to rights. They start committing dumb penalties. There was a safety at one point. I mean, it really came off the swivel late. And Preston Stone was just finding guys that were streaking down the field and wide open. But suffice to say, if SMU wants to turn into the version of SMU that I talked about on our preview, they need to look inward very quickly. because that was not an impressive showing. They should have drilled Nevada. Nevada's got a new coach. Nevada's got a pretty big rebuilding project on their own that they need to undertake before they can get back to, I think, a really respectable position in their own conference. But for SMU to go out there and look like that, flat as they did in the early going of that game, the first 3 quarters of that game, that was, to say the least, discouraging. I had people tweeting me all day about it. It was like, hey, how do you feel about the Mustangs now?
Right.
I didn't feel anything. I felt hollow inside.
Wow.
It was a horrible showing. They need to get better. Yeah. So unless they do that quickly, that's one prediction of mine that's going to go by the wayside pretty quick.
Shame on me for not noting 4,500 feet above sea level, Reno, Nevada.
Did you get called out about that?
No,
you got called out. You got called out for a different one.
I had an incorrect elevation.
You did
in Albuquerque.
I don't remember.
I thought it was the Albuquerque one, Montana State, New Mexico.
Somebody tweeted us about Laramie, I think.
Oh, Laramie's the highest, but I don't know. Whatever. I'm the captain of the elevation station here, Ty. Yeah, SMU, they come out clunky. It's game 1. So I know how into SMU's chances. Winning is better than losing. They started out with a clunker. That's okay. They will improve. And in watching this back, it's more like good for Nevada to come out with a new coach and immediately play like they did and try to take advantage, even though they gave the game away. They've had some crazy down moments. It was Brendan Lewis, who was at Colorado a couple of years ago and struggled for the Buffs a couple of years ago. And so they're piecing it together. And, SMU is getting used to new things. Quarterback coming back from a bad injury at the end of last season. I don't know. I wouldn't freak out as much as perhaps you were in that moment, but I would also say maybe I'm going to go back on my 10-2, 11-1 SMU type conversation that I was trying to have during the ACC preview episode.
And it's a perfect way to tie up the segment by mentioning that September 28th, Saturday, don't know the time yet, Florida State travels to Gerald J. Ford Stadium in Dallas to square off against SMU. So
let's get it on.
We will have some serious solid verbal interest in that matchup. Two teams that underwhelmed in some capacity, let's say, in week 0. Let's go to another new segment, actually. There are 27 games being played on Thursday and Friday. 21 are on Thursday, 6 are on Friday. In the past, we have previewed all of those games as part of like our normal Wednesday or Thursday show. And because we dropped the show later in the week, and because we don't want that to be the first thing that people hear, we have put those games at the end. Right. So if you're going to listen to the stale stuff, at least listen to it at the end of the episode, not the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
It took us 15 years, 16 years. I don't know what season this is for us. It took us all these years to realize, maybe we could just do it a little earlier in the week.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe we could do it as part of this episode. So we're going to call it the Early Bird Special. We can continue doing it throughout the course of the year because there are weekday games the whole way through. Not this many. But there are weekday games.
Bunch of Fridays, and then action early in the week. Yeah.
That we should call out, that we have time to talk about, and that I thought we could as part of this segment. So we're going to run through the big 3 games this weekend, or before we get to the weekend, I should say. We're going to run through some other games that we find interesting that we want to call out here as part of this segment. We'll give you picks. We'll give you the preview. We'll do the whole 9 yards here. But, yeah, a little bit of a different spin on things here. Early Bird Special. We will start Thursday, 8 p.m. The Fox Network. It is North Carolina, -1.5 at Minnesota. I did see that the get-in price right now is $27. I would pay $27 to go watch this game.
Yeah, Minneapolis in the summer? Sure.
Why not? Here's a nugget that I got from Mack Brown, too. Quote, depending how the game goes, we'd like to play 2 quarterbacks. And we'd like to do it for the season. End quote.
It's tough. Yeah.
You like the 2 quarterback setup? You like Max Johnson and Connor Harrell, Dan?
When was Mack Brown doing the 2 QB thing? Was that a Case McCoy, David Ash thing near the end of his Texas?
I
Were
believe
those the 2?
So.
Yeah, David Ash was on and off the field injured. I remember that, but okay. Max
Never
Johnson.
a big fan of the 2 quarterback thing, especially when you call it out before the season.
Yeah.
Now, I will say Max Johnson is a bit injury prone. And so it's not the worst strategy to make sure that your backup, presumably it's going to be Connor Harrell. It's not the worst strategy in the world to make sure he's ready because Max Johnson gets hurt all the time. And the line in front of him is not particularly strong. So it could happen again. We don't want it to happen again, but it is a possibility for sure. I like North Carolina. I didn't talk a whole lot about North Carolina. You did the preview for them a couple weeks back. Love Amari and Hampton, their running back. Love Bryson Nesbitt, their playmaking tight end. I think we just assume a certain level of competence with this offense because they've done it year in and year out. They've put quarterbacks in the NFL. To some extent, we're going to get that again, although I will say it probably is going to have to look a little bit different given that Max Johnson, I think, is going to be the alpha quarterback. They brought him over via transfer. I would assume he is going to be the main guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think he is good enough to do what we saw out of Sam Howell, out of Drake May.
I agree. And Drake May he had a pretty great game downfield against Minnesota last season, but I think he also threw a couple picks. No, it's a fascinating game for North Carolina. And look, Jeff Collins has gotten a lot of the attention with obviously Max Johnson in terms of the changes in Chapel Hill. I went back and looked, and there wasn't like crazy dramatic improvement at other places that Jeff Collins started calling the defenses at, mostly because they were already in a good place, right? When he took over at Florida, when he took over at Mississippi State, when he took over at Temple, it wasn't dramatic in one swing, one direction or the other. It got pretty bad at Georgia Tech, the defense, but you can't squarely put that on him because that was a full rebuilding effort away from an option offense. So curious to see how close to competent this North Carolina defense can be early on in this season. They were there last season. They looked to be improved before things sort of collapsed, whether it was a depth thing, whether it was an opponent thing last season. The good news for North Carolina's defense is, although Ty Hildenbrandt of the Solid Verbal College Football Podcast expects big things from Max Brosmer, Minnesota's starting quarterback. Bros before nose. Yeah, Air Max, whatever you want to call it. All Max, no breaks. Double Max quarterback game, by the way. Max Johnson, Max Brosmer, potentially.
This is college football to the max.
College football to the max. They're bringing back an offensive line, which struggled in a number of facets last season. Minnesota's offense does. Darius Taylor hopefully is healthy. I know he was a little bit dinged up in fall camp, but should be good to go as far as I could tell. I still don't think Minnesota has the type of pop to truly make North Carolina pay for 4 quarters. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a somewhat ugly game, not unlike what Minnesota did to open the season last year against, was it Nebraska? Matt Rule's first game, a 13-10 type game.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Minnesota at home, and I'm going to take the points. North Carolina favored by 1.5 in this moment.
Point and a half in this moment, yeah.
I'm going to trust home. I'm going to trust a little bit of experience. I still don't love Minnesota overall, but I think circumstantially, I think I'm going to roll with the Gophers to perhaps run it, to improve on defense a little bit. New defensive coordinator, so a bit of a mystery there for Minnesota perhaps, getting healthy after they were so beat up last year. Yeah, I'm going to go with Minnesota to turn this thing around, this back and forth with North Carolina around, and win the game outright by, 3 to 4 points, 24-20, Ty-U-Ma.
I was going to say, join me on the Ty-U-Ma train, baby. Yeah. So the matchup here for me is Carolina's line, offensive line, against a defensive front for Minnesota that has a lot back, I think will be improved. I think when push comes to shove, will end up being pretty solid. Carolina's basically a new unit up front. Mm-hmm. And because Minnesota's got a lot back, they're tweaking the scheme a little bit. They're hoping to get more pressure on their quarterback, and hopefully that will make the defensive unit a lot better. They were not as good last year as I think we had grown accustomed to seeing Minnesota defenses be.
Yeah.
And I hope this year now, as they're making some of their tweaks, they can get back to being what I expect they will, which is pretty solid at a minimum.
Yeah, they were fully really good under Joe Rossi at times. He's just
they
off
were really
Michigan
good.
State, yeah.
So I think if you're going to go at Minnesota, you want to try and test them on the back end. You want to try and test their safeties because they lose a guy like a Tyler Nubin.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about going deep, though, I don't think about Max Johnson. That is not the first guy I think of because there's a little bit of a pop gun arm there. So I don't know. I think this is a really good spot for Minnesota. You're a home dog. You're against a defense that, frankly, hasn't done anything since Mack Brown's been there. I think if you are with me on my bros before nose mantra, should also be a good opportunity, right? Max Brosmer, transfer quarterback, he should be able to eat against an FBS defense and get some confidence. You mentioned Darius Taylor. I'll throw out Daniel Jackson, who had a good year last year, despite the fact that he was kind of their only weapon out wide. I don't know. I think this is the opportunity for Minnesota at home, at night, first game of the year. They will have at least partial attention on the stage as there are 3 games going on at 8 p.m. Eastern. I don't know. I'm with Minnesota outright.
Okay.
27-20,
Tayuma. All right. Next game.
Next game, also Thursday, 8 p.m. ESPN. This one is North Dakota State at Colorado. Colorado favored by 9.5 points. You locked up Colorado a few weeks ago.
I did.
Do you still feel the same? Do you want me to lock it up again?
Yeah, why not? Go for it.
So the over-under is 59.
Right.
It's a big number in a college game. I think the assumption is, among most people that probably listen to this show and watch FBS football, it's, oh, well, Colorado's got a good offense, questionable defense. That's why this over-under is so high, because 59 is pretty good number for a college game. Let's be real. I agree. Are you still as confident, and why are you still confident in this result?
I think the line is artificially low because there's a thought among people who pay attention to college football like, oh, North Dakota State, national championship type program, have gotten really close, have gotten the best of some other. No, I think it's a fool's errand at this point. Colorado is as deep as they're going to be this season. They are playing Folsom Field, right? They're not even on the road, so they're going to open up at home. The crowd's going to be super pumped, super into it. They're basically going to be as healthy as they're going to be all season long. So whatever you think of Colorado this year, whatever you think of Deion Sanders, Shedeur is good. He's careful with the ball. He had, 2-3 picks last year? I like that element to this, that against North Dakota State. I just don't think the Bison have the team speed to run with Colorado for 4 quarters, even if it's relatively close after a quarter or something like that. I think with what Colorado's added in the portal, with how they've improved their defensive line up front against a North Dakota State offensive line that is totally rebuilt, totally new from last season, there's not a lot of speed out wide or known speed for North Dakota State on offense. I like the quarterback. I think they should be able to run the ball some, but it's a new head coach. It's just new coaches everywhere, even though I think it's Tim Polasek for North Dakota State. Came over, was a North Dakota State offensive line guy, Wyoming offensive coordinator, which was kind of below average during his time there. Like, I don't know. It's not doing it for me right now. And I think people want to undervalue Colorado because it just feels good to do that from a worldview perspective. Oh, I think Colorado's going to win this game like 35-17. I think it's going to be a pretty clean cover.
So some more context on the Bison.
Yeah.
Got to say it with a Z. Bison. Number 2 preseason team in FCS.
Cool.
To my eye, they're pretty much loaded everywhere outside of offensive line and maybe the secondary.
It's 2 new receivers too, right? 2 new starting receivers.
They're deep, though, at receiver. They've got options out wide.
Okay.
And they've also got my guy, Cole Payton.
Yeah.
Cole Payton's their backup quarterback who they're going to use in like a Taysom Hill capacity.
Yeah.
Which I feel like as a college football watching community, we're always suckers for the utility guy. The backup quarterback who you can play at tight end or split out wide or put 2 quarterbacks in the same shotgun, that type of thing. They got one of those in Cole Payton, which will be at least fun to chart here. I agree that the North Dakota State dynasty may be over.
I don't even know if that's true. I just think it's a bad matchup in a bad moment in time.
We've said that, though, for a couple years now, that it's not that we cover FCS with any great level of detail, but, North Dakota State was kind of on top of the world forever, and then other teams kind of rose up and caught up to them. They're still very, very good. And I think my point here that I want to emphasize is that they've got a lot of depth at the skill positions, and especially up front on defense. These games are hard for me to try and gauge because the impulse is always just to wave off the FCS team. Oh, they're not as talented. Oh, they're not as fast. I don't think they are as talented as Colorado, and I would agree they are not as fast. But should we at least consider for a moment the possibility that they may be better coached, even with a brand new coach? They may be better coached.
Okay.
Don't wave me off at that.
Okay.
Deion cobbled this together via the transfer portal. And I have said time and again, it takes strong leadership. It takes a strong culture to bring that many new guys in and get them all to click like that.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot. It is hard to do. So when you're stitching your roster together with so many transfers game one, there's a pretty good chance North Dakota State's going to look at least a little more organized on both sides of the football. It may take a little bit.
So it takes time for Colorado to get things together, but with North Dakota State, with a brand new head coach, they're going to immediately click.
But there's a lot of veteran leadership on this team
Okay.
still. These are guys who are not unfamiliar with North Dakota State football.
Okay.
I'm taking North Dakota State with the points.
You think it's just going to be a close Colorado win?
I think it's 35-31.
Okay.
Something like that. I agree with you. I do not feel like North Dakota State can run with the athletes that I know Colorado has. Colorado has improved. They will be a bowl team this year, full stop. But this is a veteran team on the other side of the ball. This is a team on the other side of the ball that has been very successful at the FCS ranks many times over.
Okay.
And I think they will find a way to keep this game close. Yeah, I do. So 34-35-1. Colorado wins at home.
Okay. We disagree for the first time this year. Continue.
Some other games here very quickly. Thursday night, 8 p.m., CBS Sports Network. Coastal Carolina at Jacksonville State.
Yeah.
Jack State is a 2.5-point favorite. I've got another FCS quarterback obsession now. Tyler Huff. He's the new guy for Jacksonville State. He comes over from Furman specifically because of the Rich Rod system, Dan.
Yeah.
Says it's a near perfect match for his skill set. Also, Jacksonville State has another one of my favorite storylines. And you know I love this every year.
Which is?
It's whenever a team is converting to a 3-3-5 defense.
Oh, yes.
In retrospect, I should have drafted that with fantasy things.
Yeah. They're switching to a sort of an oddball 3-3-5.
I love when they do the 3-3-5 conversion because everybody talks about it like somebody found a magic wand.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to go Jacksonvile State at home, 31-24.
It's the 3-3-5 is the Byung-Hun Kim of defensive systems, right? We're like, I don't know if he's a good pitcher, but it looks super difficult sometimes. That's a reference to an Arizona Diamondbacks relief pitcher from the aughts, the early aughts.
What a pull that was.
Thank you very much. But at his best, right?
Very good.
Effective funk, Ty. Effective funk. I like Jacksonville State as well. Not because of the 3-3-5. I think they're a better coach team. It's still up in the air. Is Noah Kim officially the starter for Coastal Carolina yet? I don't know if they've named a starter yet.
I have not seen it officially. I looked at time of recording. I did not see. Yeah. I also like Rich Rod a lot more than Tim Beck.
I like Rich Rod more. Tim Beck beat Rich Rod by 2 touchdowns in this game last year at Coastal Carolina. But I think the changes are such another year out from the old Coastal Carolina system. I'm going Jacksonville State. I think they've got more momentum.
Give me 3 other games between Thursday and Friday. These are all games taking place.
I only have 2
Saturday.
other games that I
Give me
considered.
2 other games. Give me a couple other games.
All right.
That are interesting to you and why.
FAU being depleted really hurts their chances to me as much as I think Tom Herman can build that roster back up. I think I'm going to go with Michigan State to cover a double-digit spread against FAU with Aiden Childs and some experience on the back end of that defense. And I don't think FAU is good enough to take advantage up front to a thin on experience in East Lansing defensive line. We'll see on offense. There's a couple interesting guys from Michigan State, but I think Jonathan Smith will get it done. Though you have to remember that dude took some lumps in year 1 at Oregon State on that reclamation project.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he did. I don't know if it's exactly the same circumstance.
No, it's not. But they gave up like 80 points to Ohio State in the first game. Yeah.
And more to the point, even though it is a new coach and there's a lot new, there is a lot back on defense.
Yeah.
Wasn't a great defense, but there's still veteran leadership to some extent.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Smith has shown an ability to get guys organized quickly.
Yeah.
And, I think Tom Herman's still a few years away from trying to build that roster. Right? There is vision there at FAU with what he's trying to do. We talked about it on our previews. You can see what he is trying to do, but it's going to take a bit to get that roster up to snuff. So I'm with you on Michigan State minus whatever. A game I pulled out here was TCU minus 8.5 at Stanford.
Yeah, I have that game down here as well.
Doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence to see that TCU is only favored by 8.5 against Stanford.
Well, it's at Stanford. It's week 1. I think we can both agree that Troy Taylor is worth being impressed by. That's such terrible English, Ty. Let me admit that right up front. I think Stanford's going to be not great this year, but a challenge at times. I think they're going to rise from occasional wild card with how close they were against Washington, how they were able to come back against Colorado last year. I think they beat Wazoo in an ugly 10-7, 10-6 type game. But I don't know. They have weapons on offense. If the line emerges on some level that, is even below average. They were pretty terrible last year. That's what you were talking about with Michigan State a little bit, right? Like veteran leadership. Are they good? I don't know, but they've been around. They're all 21. I think Stanford can muck it up a little bit. I like, Alec Ayomanor and Tiger Bachmeier. Like they have guys, they have playmakers. The linebackers are pretty good. And we don't know what to expect from TCU this year. I expect the offense is going to continue to get better. I expect the defense is going to be a little bit more mysterious. They brought in like 70 new guys. I don't know who's going to pop and who's not going to pop. So I'm going to give Stanford at home, maybe with a little juice joining a new conference that they can hang around in this one. So I have TCU winning this close, but Stanford hanging around. So 31-27.
That line is conspicuously low. And my first thought was, Vegas knows something.
Steer into it. Yeah.
Vegas definitely knows something on this one. So I'm with you on the Stanford front. I agree. That's an interesting matchup. And then just two other ones real quick that I'll throw out here, and both are kind of in the same vein, but Western Michigan at Wisconsin.
Okay.
Western Carolina at NC State. Both of the favorites are going to win there easily, I would expect. I shouldn't say that too definitively, given what we saw in week 0, but I would expect Wisconsin and NC State will win those games handily.
Same.
I just want to see Grayson McCall and TVD in new systems. I want to see what they look like. I want to see if TVD looks comfortable. I want to see if Grayson McCall looks comfortable. Both should have good games. Again, consider the competition. But that, to me, is two storylines worth following because I think we're pretty high on NC State, and we both are at least curious about Wisconsin, what they look like with better quarterback play. So let's see. Let's just see what they look like in week 1. There are other games here that we do not have a chance to get through. As I said, 27 in total on Thursday and Friday before we kick things off on Saturday. Then there's a game on Sunday. There's also a game on Monday. If you tune into the episode that we drop a little later this week, we're going to talk through all those games in a lot more detail, give you our full slate of picks. But for the time being anyway, that's what you have to look forward to later on this week before we get to the first real Saturday of the college football season. I should add at this point in time, Dan, if I could.
Please.
We are doing a new video show, are we not, called Big Ten Breakfast?
Big Ten Breakfast every single week. This week is Thursday, every single week. Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. This is the only week in which there are Big Ten games on Thursday, or a Big Ten game in North Carolina, Minnesota. Rewind the episode a few minutes if you missed it. I can't wait. It's going to be great. There's 18 teams. There are 18 teams in the Big Ten now. You and I are both technically Big Ten alums, so it's a coast-to-coast conference. It's huge, and the storylines are massive. You want more room to talk Rutgers, so I'm giving you that room this season.
Gila Monster, baby. Yeah.
And we like breakfast. It's happening in the mornings, live, 9 a.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. You can find it at big10breakfast.com, and couldn't be more thrilled to dig a little bit deeper into one of, or the biggest of college football's conferences.
You can go to big10breakfast.com. We bought the domain.
Yes.
That'll forward you over to our YouTube channel.
Deal.
Forward you over to the YouTube channel where you can hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of the episodes. But we're excited about it. Most of what we've done over the years has been, podcast form.
That's true.
In audio. This is our first foray into a video-only thing. So if you like it, let us know. If you think we can do something better, let us know. We have complete creative freedom to do whatever we want with Big Ten Breakfast, and I look forward to it.
It was either this or Ty was going to stream himself playing Roller Coaster Tycoon. And we settled on this, and time will tell whether or not that this was a good decision or not, if this was. Yeah.
Indeed. All right, well, we've got one final segment here.
Yeah, baby.
On this episode. We've done this now for 3 years running. We found out a couple years ago, by happenstance, while scrolling Twitter, that our friend Dan Carlin of Hardcore History was a huge Colorado Buffaloes fan. We had no idea.
Yep.
Didn't know he was into college football. And then the more we dug, the more we realized, this guy knows his ball. He knows what he's talking about. He's very into.
He would disagree, as you will hear.
He would disagree, but he's doing himself an injustice because he's already smarter than most of the people we talk to.
Yeah, it's true.
He knows his stuff. specifically about Colorado. So we were thrilled to have Dan Carlin on with us, recorded the interview last week, and want to play that back for you now. So Dan Carlin talking Colorado, talking college football as a whole, talking how you can find out more about what he is working on these days. Without further ado, let's kick it over to our good friend Dan Carlin. All right, Dan, this is the third year now that we have gone through, participated in this new tradition of ours where we bring Dan Carlin from Hardcore History onto the Solid Verbal to talk a little college football. Mr. Carlin, it is a pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. How are you?
Hold that thought, man. Like I told you a second ago, I've never felt more ignorant about what's going on in college football. And I feel like each year I've been on here, I've known less about it. So we're heading towards oblivion here in terms of my knowledge.
You know what? We follow the sport every day, and we've never known less. There's nobody that knows anything, truly, about this ridiculous sport. So you're in good company.
I think I knew more. I was trying to think ahead of time before I came on here. I bet I knew more about the entire Division I college football, over 100 teams 10 years ago, than I know about my own team now. And I'm paying attention, but it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, people come, people go. I mean, nothing's in stone. I'm completely lost. And so
would you feel better if we just talked about Sefo Lufau right now and just like the 2014 Colorado Buffaloes? Would that be easier?
I don't know. The 2014 was pretty bad. The 2016 is the only good memory I think I have from that era. My daughter says to me all the time, she goes, "You've never been good." I said, "Only since you've been born." We were great up until then.
Yeah, that was a wonderful time there. Yeah, go Ty.
So here's my question for you. You say you've never known less. Do you feel like that's because so much of the sport has changed? Or is it just because you've been busy? I know you've been very busy on your front as well. I feel like we have received feedback to that extent from a lot of people who listen to our show. We've joked on our podcast about we need refrigerator magnets to remind people of what's new so that they feel re-engaged with the sport. Like, you are not alone, I think, on some level. To what do you attribute maybe that malaise? Is that the right word?
It's not me, and it's not being busy, because I think I'm down to one sport, as I may have told you before. I used to have lots of sports when I was younger, but you get kids, you get life, sports change. College football is all I have now. So I put all the energy that used to be spread over multiple sports into this. So it's not me. And as a matter of fact, we all have more outlets for finding out information than we've ever had. I was reminiscing the other day with a friend. I graduated college in 1989, and I had to sign up for a newspaper that they snail mailed to your house about your team. And that's how the Buffalo Sports News, it was called. I can still remember it. I have them all up in the attic, I think, right?
Wow.
But there was no other way to stay on top of what was going on. But I was a fanatic about it, and I still try. But, I think we may have even touched on this when we were together last time, but it reminds me of free agency in baseball a little. Because when I started really following baseball, it was after the free agent decisions, but before the impact, right? I think Reggie Jackson was the first time where we were like, what happened there? But once that happened, we went from a time when I used to be able, and I was far from alone. I used to be able to give you the starting lineups of every team in baseball off the top of my head as a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old. But that's because they didn't change very often, right? And then once you start, the Baltimore Orioles had like the same starting lineup for like the 1970s practically, right? Mm-hmm. The Dodgers, same thing. I can still name the Dodgers lineup. But once free agency comes in, there's a lot more plugging and playing, and I have never, ever, ever denied for 1 second that it's more just and more correct and more capitalistic and more free market and everything for the players. It absolutely is. I'm not so sure it is for the game, but I'm not so sure how much that matters in the grand scheme of things. But what it's contributed to answer the question is, my goodness, I go to these message boards for my team, and every 2 weeks, I want to say, somebody there prints a brand new list of the, first teamers and the second teamers, because none of us can follow what's going on. So it's not just me.
Well, here's what you need to do, Dan. You need to convert your fandom over to Clemson, because they're not doing any of that. Colorado is the epicenter for all things transfer portal.
Oh, it's the worst. There's no question it's the worst, yes.
You need to find a team where there is less changing. Dabo Swinney would, I'm sure, happily have you on his side.
Yeah, if he thinks he's getting out of this without having to join, he's just one of those last stubborn, putting his feet in the dirt and saying, I'm not going. But I have a feeling he's going. I was going to compare it to something I shouldn't compare it to. But listen, I'm like a Cubs fan at this point before they end. I mean, it is what it is. Once it's in your blood, you're stuck. Wouldn't you want me to? Who would respect me if all of a sudden I just switched my fandom to some school I was going to say that I have no connection to. I don't have any connection to any other schools. And Here's the worst part, guys. You want to hear the tragedy that is my life? My wife is a Washington State grad, and her entire family, and I mean all of her siblings, and there are a bunch of them, and both parents and 2 grandparents all went to Oregon State. Ooh. So things are really up in the air, unsettled, and borderline, aggressive around here right now.
Do you think it makes, look, Colorado's a unique circumstance because of how many different players have come in and out, and we'll see how it works out this year. But do you think this, and you alluded to this a little bit in talking about, depth charts looking different week to week in the offseason, does this make you root for the helmet more than ever, where you're just sort of watching Colorado football like it's in some ways like an old football video game where it just sort of says wide receiver number 4, quarterback number 9, right? Where it's not the names as much as just like the golden helmet and Ralphie running out on the field?
I don't know if I'm there yet. I do know that I've already run into the trying to sort of get to know and root for certain players, in the first year of the Deion Sanders thing, and players that you think, okay, a lot of people are going to come and go, but this person will still be here. And then they're gone, and you're just like, okay, what am I doing here? When do you start caring? Look, I want all these people to play well, but from what I understand, and I'm ignorant. That's going to be my phrase for the show, my catchphrase. I have a T-shirt made up. But I don't think some of these players even have to go to school anymore. Since COVID, I think some of these people can do it virtually, which is fine. I don't have a problem with it, but it detaches us from the school even more. So when you're talking about rooting for the helmet, if they're not even, look, I think I made a joke the last time I was on your show about the last bastion that separates college from pro. And that's the fact that you have to have the stadium and the team play in the same town where the university is. But what happens when that first team says, listen, the Ducks could be that team. They're innovative, right? Somebody could say, look, come to Vegas. We'll give you $500 million a year. You can still be the Oregon Ducks. You're still associated with the university. We'll still have priority seating for your students. But you play in Vegas now. That's the last thing separating the two, right? So and here's the thing: some of these schools play in great places already. If you're in LA, you're in a mass media market where you'd have an NFL team too. But some of these people play. Ames, Iowa. If that team could go to New York and become, the New York Cyclones affiliated with Iowa State. But that's the last bastion. When we pierce that, it's all over.
So notably, you are a Colorado fan. And after, I want to say week 1 last season, you and I had exchanged some emails because Colorado was very much in vogue, right? Beating TC, that was like the moment in week 1 last season. What was the ride like for you as a Colorado fan following the team week in and week out? Because polarizing, controversial, but very, very, very much in the headlines throughout the course of the season. Can you describe what that experience was like from your end?
Oh, it's weird, man. It is. It's weird. And it's weird for any number of reasons. The TCU game was specifically weird because, put yourself in my shoes, we had no idea what to expect, right? So that first of all, first games were that way for everybody, right? Especially in this era with so many transfers, you're kind of like, okay, I think I know what's coming, but I don't. If you're playing, the poor Sisters of the Poor or something, it's not a big deal. But if you're playing a significant game in your first game, you're kind of going, gosh, I hope we show up. I hope this is good. I hope the offensive line's better, all that stuff. So when things went so well against TCU, and this was before, remember, TCU had played in the national championship game the year before. So the idea was that this is some awesome, awesome TCU team. So you kind of afterwards were scratching your head going, okay, well, now what do we have here, right? I didn't know before the game and I don't know after the game. But I started thinking, I'm a cynic and a pessimist, so I never get really excited. But I was going, okay, maybe it won't be that bad. But I did know, and everybody else did too, because we're all ignorant, but not that ignorant, that there was not depth. And, when you don't have depth, what happens as the season goes on, right? The games get tougher and you have less people to stretch out. And as we've been told by everybody who's ever played the game ever, everybody's hurt after a couple of weeks into the season. And so at that point, you can start to see teams grind down, right? And that's definitely what happened to the Buffs. And it wasn't the first time I've seen it, though. So I've been to that rodeo before.
Where were you emotionally during and after the Nebraska game? Just because you've said a lot that is what you grew up on emotionally, your hatred for the color red and for all things Nebraska. So when Colorado has that, arguably their most impressive win of the season, given what the final score was, what was your roller coaster of emotion that Saturday and immediately thereafter?
Well, that was weirder for me than any Nebraska game ever because it was the only one I've ever been to live. It's the only one I was ever, because I'm one of those few people that enjoys watching the games on television better than live. I can't see enough live, right? I want 900 angles. I want slow motion. I want replay. I want to hear the stupid, inane things the announcers are saying, all that stuff, right? I want high def. I want, so the only thing that's better about live is I can see what the cornerbacks are doing and I can see a little farther downfield. But otherwise, so I never go, especially Nebraska. I can't be around other human beings. Being around other people is always dicey. But the university has been very nice to me, and they invited me, and they it was not a thing that would have been cool to turn down. So I went, and my wife's brother, an Oregon State grad, worked for Nebraska. I almost disowned him, but he worked for Nebraska. And so he and some other Nebraska buddies came with us. He had tickets too. And so we went to the game together. We stayed in Denver because you couldn't get a place in Boulder. Drove up there together, and they're all in their Nebraska gear. And I said, did you guys bring something to change into, once the game's over? And they said, what are you talking about? And my wife gets on me every time. She goes, oh, you make this big deal like it's going to be a problem or something. None of these kids even remember what it was, blah, 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 right? So everybody's giving me a hard time. Fine. Okay, no problem. So we get there, and it's already getting like a little weird when people are in cars looking at us. So we get there. I have a space to park the car. It came with the ticket, right? So we park the car. They take a few pictures. My wife and I leave to go to the game. They stay afterwards a little bit. So I find out later, the minute we left, a cop came up to them all in their Nebraska gear and said, do you have a right to park here? And they said, oh, yeah, we're with Dan. They said, spell his last name. And it's the first thing they get a hard time from the cops right away, right? So they go in. I'm hearing all these stories. I can't even tell some of the stories. They're actually very funny, but they're a little too raunchy for me to tell. But apparently, the young people of Colorado were embracing the stories that they had heard about the rivalry because it was rough. And eventually my brother-in-law and his friends ended up leaving early, and we took an Uber back to Denver because they did not bring a change of clothes, and it was rough. So so actually, though, it was a very interesting time. I was on the field for a little bit looking around, and it was a great scene. It was sold out. It was crazy.
So then you fast forward a couple weeks later, and Colorado is the sort of, I won't call it the toast of college football, but certainly the TV ratings are there, the conversation is there, and the Buffs now come to your hometown, not hometown, but where you live in Eugene, Oregon, for a huge matchup, and emotions are, running high. What was your experience watching that game as, a team you're familiar with in Oregon sort of has its way with Colorado and I think deflates the season in a very specific way?
Well, I happened to be, it's funny, I don't go to that many games, but I happened to be at a game while that game was going on at Utah. Because my daughter goes to Utah, and I forget who Utah was playing. It was, Florida. They were playing Florida. I think it was a big game. And I think it was the same. Does that ring a bell to you guys?
Utah was playing UCLA, I think, that week.
Yes, okay, it was UCLA. Sorry, all right. But so I was trying to stay on top of it with scoring updates, but
Got it.
The Wi-Fi in the stadium was not awesome. But I remember looking down, and it was quickly out of hand, and I was like, oh no. I had thoughts about that, though. It was not a good, they say styles make fights.
Yeah.
And that was not a good matchup anyway. I was hoping, you always hope that certain people can pull rabbits out of hats. And the Deion Sanders thing if there's one thing you can say about him is that stuff happens sometimes that are inexplicable with him. And so you can sometimes magically project that onto him when otherwise common sense would say, you have no chance in this game or whatever.
What was your experience like last year as a Deion Sanders, a Coach Prime close observer? The sort of ups and downs, the entertainment factor, the positive and negative attention he received. How did you feel about Deion under a bolder microscope last year?
Oh, well, I am not a close observer. Let's not let
Okay.
anybody. I mean, I watch like other fans watch, but I'll tell you that here's the thing with Mr. Sanders, Coach Prime, whatever we're going to call him, is that he's too flashy for me personally. I'm not a flashy guy. I'm the old man who yells at the clouds, who wants his running back after he scores to hand the football, to the ref. So that's just my style. So it's not my style. And I think we may have talked about this, but at the time he shows up, he is an answer to a prayer, which is we're entering a time of mass change in Colorado football as it tries to figure out how it's going to handle realignment and whether or not it's going to end up in a meaningful conference, however many of those there's going to end up being when the musical chairs game stops. And I guess what I'm saying is I could have waited around another decade or decade and a half for a coach who was more my style, who was going to try to do things the old-fashioned. But when you need the electrical paddles after your heart stops to resurrect things quickly, I feel like the guy was a shot to adrenaline straight into the program's heart at a time when we just didn't have a lot of time to sit around a few more years and figure it out, especially with the Pac-12 collapsing around us. And, I'm going to give Rick George some credit here, the AD. I mean, maneuvering around those kinds of things and trying to not be the last couple of teams that don't have a place to sit when the musical chairs get. I mean, the tragedy of Oregon State and Washington State has not quite been felt yet. Wait till the season starts and wait till you run out of this Pac-2 thing and they're left trying to either find a conference or to backfill, what used to be the Conference of Champions with, I'm not going to malign any schools, but schools that just, would have figured out last in the conference last year.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes. But I listen, Colorado needed something like this at the time. I hope it works out well. I do think, as everyone should, the key season is not this year. It is next year. Is Deion Sanders there?
Yeah.
That's the question. Number two is, and I've said this always, but especially since the Dan Hawkins years when we had Dan Hawkins' kid starting at quarterback, that I don't like that. Shedeur Sanders is amazingly talented. I think he is the best passing quarterback to ever play at Colorado. But I don't love that the coach is the dad, right? And I don't like that we've got a safety whose coach is the dad. I have bad memories, not with Deion Sanders, but it's so next year when both those kids are gone and Travis Hunter, his sort of adopted kid, is gone, if he's still there, I think that's going to be his real first year of coaching. In the full sense of the word, right? Where there are no heartstrings, where nothing besides winning is what matters, and we're not worried about our kids or anything. We'll see. So to me, that's the big question mark here.
What are the vibes like on the message boards right now, Dan?
Oh, I hate this time of year. I hate it because the vibes a few months ago were people actually talking about things that seem to matter, but now everything has been played out to the point where they're almost yelling at each other over politics. There's nothing left to say. What's the old line is, you got to play a game now for there to be material to talk about. So I think some of the Colorado message boards are getting some fuel from the press versus Deion Sanders or the other fan bases versus Deion Sanders stuff. I don't know what that is. To me, that's just Deion's always been good at Deion. Like he's my buddy, but he's always been good at that. That's sort of one of his superpowers. I think he uses it as motivation. I mean, remember the line last year with Nebraska, Coach Rule at Nebraska said something pretty innocuous. I don't remember it rubbing me the wrong way, and I'm sensitive. But boy, he took it and ran with it. It became a motivational message board tool, and that may be genius, right? That might not be a knee-jerk reaction. That might be, jury is still out, but I'll tell you what, everything else aside, the guy has put Colorado football back on the map. We're selling tons of stuff. The ratings are frankly unbelievable. This Nebraska game this year, I would be shocked if it wasn't one of the top 3 ratings games early in the year. And that's crazy, right? For 2 programs that haven't been anywhere in quite some time. So we'll see. But listen, they've given an old man hope, right?
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question. So we saw year 1 under Deion. I think even if the wins weren't there, for sure, he pumped a lot of energy into that program. It has been a revolving door with respect to the transfer portal and the depth charts, as we described here a little bit earlier. What does success look like for a Colorado fan in year 2 under Deion? Is it making a bowl? Is it establishing more stability? When you think of it in terms of a season that has yet to be played, how will you judge what we see in 2024?
Well, let me first say about last year that I don't know that I think the win total was all that surprising. I think the streakiness of it, right, to win a few and then lose all the rest was disappointing. And I also think blowing certain games, that Stanford game is going to turn out to be one of the great losses, So it's sometimes the way it happens, not that it happened. If you told me we only got 4 wins last year, but we got better, I think I would have been okay with that. Maybe not the way it happened. So then we come to this year. Well, listen, we've kind of mortgaged everything, right? I mean, it's the Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter show here, and there's a certain get the most out of it you can feeling because you feel like there's got to be a drop-off next year, and we're not exactly backfilling the program with high school recruits really well. We're not stockpiling all that, so it is going to be interesting to see if you could have a turn and burn transfer portal strategy every year. I mean, here in Eugene, they haven't really, it's been a while since they've developed a quarterback in-house, right? And we used to joke about what good quarterback would come to the Ducks when every year they just go grab one from elsewhere, right? And I thought, is that a sustainable strategy? Well, now everybody, especially Sanders, but everybody's doing it with everybody, right? So that's why I keep saying next year's the big one for me. But this year I feel like my expectations are higher because there's going to be such a drop-off and you need to kind of win now. I would love to see 8 wins. I don't know. I think Vegas, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, you may not know this either because, Colorado football is so big that everybody pays attention. But 5.5, I think, is the over-under on wins. So 8 would be an outperformance there. 9 is impossible. I don't have it. And of course, beat Nebraska. I mean, there's that's worth 2 to me right there.
Yeah.
Because guys, let me just say it. The meme that's going around is I'm sorry. Listen, I have a lot of listeners in Nebraska. I don't mean to upset anyone. This is just fun, right? But 5,000 days, guys, since you've beaten us. So, and this is 5 in a row, I think. Is it 5 in a row? We'll see.
It's been a minute.
It's in Nebraska. I love you.
What do you think about the return to the Big 12? You mentioned Rick George maneuvering, and you sort of lamented before that, your scar tissue, we call it as a fan, was in the Big 12, was with Nebraska, was with Oklahoma, was with all these teams, and before that, the Big 8. Does it feel nice to land back in the Big 12? I know you're a West Coast guy and also lament the dissolution of the Pac-12. Where's your head in terms of Colorado kind of back at home in this conference?
It is weird, isn't it? It's like going back to your old neighborhood and moving back in, but the neighbors have all changed.
Right.
and some of your favorite neighbors that brought the most cachet to the community are the ones that are gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to upset an entire different fan base than I normally upset, but I don't mind Texas being gone. Texas is a tough team to be in the same league with. I think there's a lot of teams that would agree. There's a bunch of teams that are tough to be in the same league with. And Texas they're a little like The Blob, that old horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
They just sort of take over a little at a time, and you turn around, all of a sudden the league offices are in Dallas, and oh my God, these things just sort of happen.
Mm-hmm.
J.R. Ewing is over there running the entire thing, and they have their own network, and oh my God. And so Texas can go have fun. The Southeast Conference is actually a good place for them, I think. Oklahoma, though, if you could give me Oklahoma and Nebraska back in the Big 12, that would just be fine with me. But without them, it is like going to the neighborhood, and It's going to look like a power conference next to whatever the Pac-2 morphs into, And it is. Here's the thing. It is a power conference, maybe not in football. The basketball thing is brilliant. I was listening to what their chancellor was saying about how he's going to create such a strong basketball conference that you can't ignore them as a conference, even if they're not one of the top 2 football ones. It's a great hedge strategy.
Right.
It keeps you relevant, right? And you're large enough so that you just can't. So the goal here, right, is positioning. Who's going to end up in the super conference? Who's going to be amalgamated and who's going to get left out? And this is the game Clemson and FSU are worried about being left out of, right? It'll be interesting. And then what happens to Notre Dame, and is the whole independent thing in football even a thing anymore? You guys are going to know more about that than I am, but for a traditionalist and a history nut like yours truly, it's all very hard. And it all die.
Yeah. Well, how much non-Colorado football are you going to watch this year? A lot? Does it make it more exciting that we're going to have new big matchups that, Ohio State's going to be in Eugene and Georgia's going to be in Austin, Texas? Or does this make you sort of hunker down more and just sort of lock in on Colorado?
Well, according to my wife, I'm not a college football fan. I'm a Colorado football fan.
Okay.
So she watches all the games, and she'll say, let's watch a game, and I'll look, and it'll be, Vanderbilt, Rutgers. I'll be like, yeah, no, I'm not in the mood. She's like, oh, you don't really like college football. So, but she's probably right to a degree. I don't know. Sometimes, as you guys know, too, sometimes there are just teams that are fun.
Sure.
And that take over the year Boise State for a couple of years was, must-watch football. Or sometimes there's teams that have either interesting or scandalous or whatever backstories. I'm old enough to remember those Miami teams that dressed in camouflage.
Sure.
I remember I was working at ABC in LA, and they were, this is probably 90, 91 in there. And it was Notre Dame against Miami. And that was the year one of the producers who was a big Notre Dame fan came in wearing the Catholics versus the convicts sweatshirt. Yeah. So Miami was must watch back then because, you couldn't take your eyes off them, right? So sometimes you get those kind of teams. And then sometimes there's players where you just look and you just go, I'm trying to think who the last person you just couldn't take your eyes off was. Reggie Bush was a little like that, remember?
Sure.
You look at the highlights. I remember Randy Moss. I've never gotten over, even as a pro, with Randy Moss, you'd be like, he's like playing against boys. So sometimes that's enough to get me watching, to take it back to the question.
Yeah.
But no, listen, I think rightly or wrongly, because he's a national brand, Deion Sanders is going to be one of the big stories this year. And because there's a lot of people that want him to fail and are going to revel in that if that happens. So it's weird to have my team be, we talked about this last year. So weird to have them be relevant. And the hate is interesting. So anyway, we'll see. I'm excited. I don't know how to get Big 12 games, by the way. I don't know how I'm seeing this on television now. I'm going to have to figure a lot of things out.
We will make those refrigerator magnets. We'll send you one.
Yeah, we'll send you a magnet that will give you all the links. We'll give you all the info.
But I'd love to know, other than quarterback, what our team looks like positionally.
His name is Dan Carlin, of course, of Hardcore History. It is always a pleasure to have him on this show, just to talk Colorado, just to talk college football from a 30,000-foot view. It is always a pleasure. The third straight year that we've done this now, Dan. What have you been working on? What's keeping you busy these days? Where can people find your work?
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, people can find my work at the website, dancarlin.com, or wherever you get fine podcasts, anywhere. Just, working on lots of stuff that involves kids and colleges and traveling and moving people into apartments and all that kind of stuff. So trying to figure out a way to get in the studio with all of life intervening, I'm sure you guys can relate.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, hey, a pleasure as always. We will do this again soon. We'll try to reach out at some point during the season and see how you're holding up with Colorado. But to the best of your ability, enjoy the Colorado season in 2024.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, guys, and continued success. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. We have renewed another
So good.
year of the Dan Carlin tradition, bringing him on to Solid Verbal.
We went to the same high school.
You did.
Dan and I went to the same high school, separated by a few years, but it turns out we had at least one or two of the same teachers either way. So yeah, there's the connection is alive and well, Ty.
Great to have him on. Go and check out his work, Dan Carlin, one of the OGs here in the podcasting world.
Yeah.
Hardcore History, one of my favorite shows. All right. Look, hit follow, hit subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you listen a little later on in the week when we do the full week 1 preview thing. That's going to drop to the feed Thursday morning. You can watch that out on YouTube around noon Eastern on, again, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@solidverbal.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned earlier, Big Ten Breakfast, something else you can look forward to. We're going to drop that on Thursday. It's going to run live, 9 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday. And last but certainly not least, Run the Board is our pick'em game. Compete for a $500 Visa gift card, Dan.
Unless
you don't want to compete. Unless you don't want to compete. That's up to you.
You're scared. Yeah, it's okay.
Playruntheboard.com, verballers.com is where you can go for more info on that. And I guess that's it. And the merch store. We relaunched the store.
New merch. I have breaking news as well, but talk about the merch. Merch.solidverbal.com.
Yeah, we have 3 new shirts, 4 new hats, 2 mugs, a water bottle, and a magnet that is still too expensive for us to put on the store.
Yeah, we're not putting the magnet up yet. We're going to figure out the magnet.
If you know a magnet guy, hit us up, solidverbal@gmail.com. Otherwise, no, merch.solidverbal.com, or you can go to our website and you'll see the link at the top. What's your news?
Well, you got to play the breaking news.
Oh, really?
Sound for me. Yeah.
Do I have to do the yell too? Do you want the
No. I just, on behalf of you have a furry little bitch in your life that just came along, right?
There is a new verballer, yeah. There is a new verballer.
Will you post pictures of this new furry friend of yours, your new housemate?
Let's be real. It's a dog. It's a female dog.
Well, I say family member here. Will you post pictures in our Discord server?
I've already started doing that.
There you go. So if you want pictures of Ty's newest housemate, Ty's got a puppy. How old is she?
She's a little over 8 weeks old at this point. Yeah.
Little over 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
Joining your other dog.
Yeah.
Which she probably wouldn't love to be referred to as that. The other dog.
The other dog. I don't think she listens to podcasts or understands English all that well, although better than you'd expect.
Yeah,
so she may not appreciate that if she knew what you were saying. But no, we've got 2 pups now in the house.
2 dog house lifestyle, whatever.
That's right. And it's good that I'm down here in the sound insulated studio because I can faintly hear them barking. The microphone can't hear it, but I can hear it. And there's a lot of commotion upstairs that I need to attend to as soon as we hit stop here today. Yeah.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It'll be an interesting week 1 to say the least.
Great.
Short on sleep, but not short on college football, Dan.
No, sir.
We've got a lot to talk about on our next episode. Thanks for tuning in. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt. Hope you'll be with us all season long. Stay solid.
Peace.